Part 1. The Rise of Richard Kane. Every city has its shadows. In Stonebridge, those shadows wore a badge, and no one cast a longer, darker shadow than Officer Richard Kane. Kane wasn't always the monster people would later call him. He was born in the late 1970s, in a small town just outside Stonebridge. His father was a decorated police officer, his mother a school teacher. From childhood, Richard grew up with the idea that the world was divided into two kinds of people, those who followed the law and those who broke it. And in his mind, those who broke it deserved no mercy. His father drilled that into him day after day. Son, respect is earned by fear, not by kindness. You hesitate, you lose. Those words stuck to him like gospel. At school, Richard wasn't popular, but he was intimidating, larger than most. Boys with a sharp jawline and cold eyes, he found his identity in control. By high school, he wasn't interested in friends. He was interested in dominance. When he turned 18, he didn't even consider college. Instead, he signed up for the police academy. The academy years, Richard Kane entered the academy with a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't there to serve and protect. He was there to win. His instructors noticed quickly. He wasn't the best shot, but he was ruthless in tactical drills. He had no hesitation in chokehold exercises. During simulated confrontations, he always went harder than necessary, sometimes leaving his classmates bruised and shaken. One instructor pulled him aside once and said, "Kane, this isn't about breaking people. It's about protecting them." Kane's reply was chilling. "You don't protect sheep by being gentle with wolves." By graduation, Kane's reputation was clear. He was aggressive, relentless, and eager to impose authority. The department wasn't blind to it, but in a city like Stonebridge, where crime rates were spiking, they saw aggression as an asset. They wanted tough cops. Kane seemed perfect. First years on the forced Stonebridge in the early 2000s was a city on the edge. Deindustrialization had gutted the economy. Poverty, drugs, and gangs were rampant in neighborhoods like East Stonebridge, a predominantly black community long neglected by city leadership. Residents lived under constant tension between survival on the streets and survival from those sworn to patrol them. Kane was assigned there almost immediately. The first few years defined him. He quickly learned how to bend the rules. He would stop cars without cause, frisk young men without warrants, and intimidate shop owners into giving him tips. In his mind, it wasn't corruption. It was order. If the courts in the city failed to control crime, he believed he had the right to do it his way. At first, his fellow officers weren't sure what to make of him. But then they noticed the results. Arrests piled up, crime stats looked good on paper, and Kane seemed fearless in the most dangerous parts of the city. He became the go-to cop for tough jobs. Superiors liked him because he made them look good. Politicians liked him because his numbers proved they were getting tough on crime. And Kane? Kane liked himself because he was becoming untouchable, building the reputation. By the late 2000s, Richard Kane wasn't just another cop. He was the cop in East Stonebridge. Residents knew his name. Parents warned their kids, "Stay inside. Don't give Kane a reason." His presence on the block meant tension in the air, a silence that spread like smoke. Some called him the Shadow because he always seemed to appear where trouble was, or where he decided trouble existed. Kane thrived on that fear. It fueled him. He would smirk when he drove his cruiser slowly down the block, music cutting off, conversations dying, curtains shifting. He was addicted to the power. But power without accountability corrodes. Kane's arrests were often questionable. Evidence went missing. Testimonies contradicted his reports. Complaints stacked up at internal affairs, but each one vanished into the system. Why? Because Kane had backing. His precinct saw him as a soldier. His union defended him like family. And the city's politics were clear. Crime rates mattered more than complaints. The cycle protected him. The fear sustained him. And Kane grew bolder. The turning point: every abuser has a moment where they realize the rules don't apply to them. For Kane, that moment came in 2010. One evening, he and his partner stopped a car in East Stonebridge. 2 teenagers inside, no weapons, no drugs, just kids heading home. Kane decided one of them looked suspicious. He pulled him out, slammed him against the hood, and searched him violently. The boy's mother came running down the street screaming. A crowd gathered. Someone recorded the incident on a flip phone. The video made it to local news. For a moment, Kane looked exposed, but the department called it appropriate use of force. The boy was charged with resisting arrest, and the case disappeared. For Kane, the message was clear. I can do anything. The Cult of Fear. By 2012, Richard Kane was practically a myth in East Stonebridge. He bragged openly to other officers. These people only understand one language: force. His locker room talk was filled with casual racism. He justified it by claiming he was keeping the streets safe. Residents, however, were suffocating. They described living under 2 threats: the gangs in their neighborhoods and the badge of Richard Kane. Mothers taught their children how to survive a Kane stop. Don't talk back, don't move, don't make eye contact. But children grew restless. Young men began recording interactions, sharing them online. Stories spread of Kane planting drugs, roughing up teenagers, humiliating fathers in front of their kids. He had become more than a cop. He was the symbol of a system that treated East Stonebridge as a war zone. And like every symbol of unchecked power, his downfall was inevitable. Enter Marcus Bell Weil. Kane built his reign of fear. A teenager named Marcus Bell was growing up just a few blocks away. Marcus was the opposite of everything Kane believed in. Where Kane saw threats, Marcus saw stories. He was a kid with a laptop, a notebook, and a dream: to be a musician who told the truth about his city. He rapped about poverty, about racism, about police harassment. His lyrics weren't just art, they were a mirror. And kids in East Stonebridge saw themselves in his words. To Kane, Marcus Bell was just another loudmouth kid. But to the community, he was hope. And one night, fate would collide their 2 worlds in a way that would shake the nation. Setting up Kane's rise, his abuse of power, and introducing Marcus as the counterforce. Part 2. The City of Fear and Marcus Bell's Dreams. East Stonebridge was a neighborhood where every block carried its own scars. The streets weren't just pavement. They were battlefields of poverty, neglect, and survival. On one side, drugs and gangs carved their presence into the community. On the other side, the police carved fear just as deep. If you lived there, you grew up knowing 2 truths. The streets could take your life, and the badge could take it just as fast. And in the center of it all was Marcus Bell. Growing up in the shadows, Marcus was born in 2001. In a small 2-bedroom apartment above a bodega. His mother, Denise, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide. His father had left when Marcus was a toddler, leaving Denise to raise him and his little sister Maya on her own. Life in East Stonebridge wasn't easy, but Denise instilled in her children 2 things: hope and resilience. She would come home exhausted, her scrubs stained, but she always asked Marcus about his schoolwork and his music. "Baby, your words are your power," she told him. "Don't ever let this city take that from you." Marcus listened. He wasn't the loudest kid on the block, but he carried a notebook everywhere. While others played basketball, Marcus scribbled lyrics. His friends teased him sometimes. "Yo, Bell, you think you're the next Nas?" But when he spit his verses, silence followed. Because Marcus had something most didn't: truth in his voice. The music. At 13, Marcus discovered a cracked version of music software on a beat-up laptop his cousin gave him. From that moment, his room became a studio. He recorded with a cheap mic, layering beats and verses late into the night. His lyrics weren't fantasies about money and fame. They were reflections of life in East Stonebridge. He rapped about the corner store clerk who kept a bat under the counter, about the sound of sirens that never stopped, about kids who went to school hungry but came home to see cops harassing their brothers. One verse became a local anthem among his friends. "Lights flash red and blue, but it don't mean safe in my city. Even justice wears a crooked face." Marcus was speaking what everyone felt, but didn't always have the courage to say. And in a place like East Stonebridge, that made him dangerous. Life under Kane by this time, Richard Kane had already established himself as the terror of East Stonebridge. He drove through neighborhoods like a king inspecting his kingdom. Residents fell silent at the sight of his cruiser. Mothers pulled their children closer. Young men turned corners to avoid him. For Marcus, Kane wasn't just a cop. He was the embodiment of the system he rapped about. Marcus had been stopped twice by Kane before he was even 17. The first time, Kane accused him of fitting the description of a robbery suspect. The second time, Kane pulled him out of a car with friends, tossing his backpack on the hood and scattering his notebooks. Marcus remembered the smirk on Kane's face as he flipped through the pages. "What's this, rhymes? You think anybody cares what you got to say?" Marcus said nothing. He just picked up his papers when Kane tossed them to the ground. But in his notebook that night, he wrote a new verse. "They try to crush my words, but I ain't gonna fold. Even shadows fade when the truth gets told." The community's boiling point by 2018, tension in East Stonebridge had reached a breaking point. Social media made it harder to hide what officers like Kane were doing. More residents recorded stops, more videos circulated online. Complaints grew louder, but the city still backed Kane. To them, his arrest numbers outweighed the protests, but to the people, Kane wasn't a protector. He was a predator, Denise Bell remembered one night vividly. She was walking home with groceries when she saw Kane stop a group of teenagers, forcing them to sit on the curb while he searched their pockets. She froze, clutching her bags, praying Marcus wasn't among them. That night, she told her son, "Promise me you'll keep your head down, please." Marcus hugged her. "Ma, I can't stay silent forever. Someone has to speak. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't trying to be a martyr." But Marcus understood something important. Silence kept the system alive, and his music was his weapon against it. The rise of Marcus's voice. In 2019, Marcus uploaded his first track to SoundCloud. It was raw, unpolished, but it spread through Stonebridge like wildfire. The song, Crooked Streets, got hundreds of local plays in days. Kids from different blocks messaged him, asking for more. Soon, Marcus was performing at open mics, his name whispered as the kid who might actually put Stonebridge on the map for something other than crime. By the summer of 2020, he had recorded enough tracks for a mixtape. His dream was becoming real. He wanted to leave East Stonebridge, not to escape, but to shine a light on it. His plan was simple: music first, then change. But dreams don't always get the chance to grow. Kane tightens his grip as Marcus's voice rose. Kane's paranoia deepened. He hated the phones in everyone's hands, the way cameras seemed to pop up during his stops. He saw videos circulating online, painting him as the villain. In his mind, the community was turning against him, and he wasn't about to lose control. Other officers noticed Kane's growing rage. "He's going too far," one rookie whispered. But no one dared challenge him. Kane had friends in high places, and he wasn't afraid to remind his colleagues. "Internal affairs can't touch me," he'd sneer. But the truth was, cracks were forming. Complaints piled higher. Investigators started to take notice. Kane was still on the streets, but his world was beginning to shift. And then, there was Marcus Bell, the young man who represented everything Kane couldn't control. Kane saw Marcus as another mouthy kid, another symbol of defiance. What he didn't realize was that Marcus's words were becoming louder than Kane's badge. The inevitable collision. By late 2020, Marcus had nearly 5,000 followers online. His music wasn't just entertainment, it was activism. One of his latest tracks, "The Law Don't Love Us," went viral locally, with lyrics that called out corrupt cops directly. Everyone in East Stonebridge knew who it was about. Everyone, including Richard Kane. That winter, Kane reportedly told another officer, "These kids think their words make them powerful. Let's see what power feels like when I put them in cuffs." It was a warning, and it was aimed squarely at Marcus. The night before, Marcus stayed up late one night in December, recording what would unknowingly become his last track. It was slower, more emotional than usual. He rapped about his mother's strength, about the weight of being young and black in Stonebridge, about wanting to see a future beyond sirens and stops. Maya, his little sister, peeked into the room. "You still up?" "Almost done," Marcus said with a smile. "This one's for you and Mom." She sat on the edge of his bed, listening to his verse. "Even when I'm gone, let the words carry on. Tell my story in the light when the night feels long." Maya didn't know those words would haunt her forever, because within 24 hours, Richard Kane and Marcus Bell's paths would collide in a way that would change Stonebridge and the entire country forever. This chapter sets the stage with Marcus's voice rising, the community's fear boiling, and Kane's paranoia deepening, building toward the inevitable tragedy. Part 3. The Shooting Night and Viral Uprising. It was a cold December evening in East Stonebridge. The air was sharp, the streets quiet except for the occasional burst of laughter from kids huddled around corner stores. Christmas lights blinked faintly from apartment windows, struggling against the darkness of a city that felt long forgotten. Marcus Bell had just finished a late recording session at his friend Darius's basement studio. He wore his favorite black hoodie, headphones draped around his neck, and his backpack slung over his shoulder, stuffed with notebooks and a USB drive of his latest tracks. "Yo, this is the one," Darius told him as Marcus packed up. "This mixtape's gonna blow, I'm telling you. 2021 is your year, bro." Marcus smiled, humble but hopeful. "We'll see. I just want people to hear the truth." That night, as he walked home, Marcus thought about his mother and sister. He planned to show Maya his new verse tomorrow, maybe even take her shopping with the little money he saved. He didn't know it, but those would be his last thoughts as an ordinary teenager. The encounter Richard Kane was on patrol that night, cruising slowly through East Stonebridge with the same cold authority he always carried. His reputation preceded him. Everyone on the block noticed his car before he noticed them, but tonight was different. Kane wasn't just patrolling, he was hunting. His career was under scrutiny, his authority questioned by videos, by complaints, by kids like Marcus putting his name into rhymes. Kane needed to remind the city who owned these streets. Around 10:45 p.m., he spotted Marcus walking alone near Jefferson Street. A young black man in a hoodie with a backpack. To Kane, that was enough. He pulled over, lights flashing red and blue across the cracked pavement. "Hey! Stop right there!" Kane barked, stepping out of his cruiser. Marcus froze. He had been stopped before, but something about Kane's tone felt sharper, more dangerous. "What's the problem, officer?" Marcus asked, steady but cautious. "Hands out of your pockets." "Turn around." "Backpack on the ground," Kane ordered. Marcus hesitated. He had nothing to hide, but he was tired of being treated like a suspect in his own neighborhood. "I'm just walking home," he said quietly. Kane stepped closer, hand hovering near his holster. "Don't talk back." "Do it now." The crowd forms. Two young men across the street noticed the encounter. One of them, a college student named Jamal, pulled out his phone and hit record. In Stonebridge, people knew to record when Kane was around. As Kane pushed Marcus against the hood of his cruiser, demanding to know what was in his backpack, Marcus protested. "It's my music, man. Just lyrics." "Nothing illegal." Kane ripped the bag open, scattering papers and a flash drive across the car. He sneered. "You think anybody cares about your raps?" Marcus looked him in the eyes. "Yeah, they do." That small defiance lit the fuse. The gunshot accounts later differed in small details, but one thing was undisputed. Kane escalated. He claimed Marcus resisted. Witnesses said Marcus simply tried to pick up his papers from the hood. In a matter of seconds, Kane pulled his gun. "Stop moving," he shouted. "I'm not." Marcus started, hands raised halfway. The shot rang out before the sentence finished. A single bullet tore into Marcus's chest. He staggered back, eyes wide, blood spreading across his hoodie. The papers from his notebook fluttered down around him like broken wings. Gasps and screams erupted from the bystanders. Someone yelled, "He was unarmed. He wasn't doing nothing." Jamal's phone kept recording, the shaky video capturing every second. The shot, the fall. Kane standing over Marcus's crumpled body. Marcus tried to breathe, his lips moving faintly as if whispering one last verse. Within minutes, he was gone. The video goes viral by midnight. The video was online. By 3 a.m., it had spread across Stonebridge. By morning, it was national news. The footage was grainy but undeniable. A teenager stopped without cause, shot by a cop known for his brutality. The hashtag started immediately. Justice for Marcus, Stonebridge, Kane. The killer Twitter exploded. TikTok filled with clips of Marcus's music overlaid with the video of his death. His lyrics, "Even shadows fade when the truth gets told," became the anthem of outrage. News anchors described him as an aspiring artist silenced too soon. Celebrities retweeted his story. Activists called for immediate action. Stonebridge, once ignored, was now the center of the country's attention. The protests by the evening after the shooting, hundreds gathered on Jefferson Street. They lit candles where Marcus had fallen, chanting his name, holding signs with his face printed over murals. Say his name. Marcus Bell! Say his name! Marcus Bell! Kane's name was shouted too, but not in reverence. Protesters demanded his arrest, his badge, his life behind bars. Denise Bell stood at the front of the crowd, clutching Marcus's headphones in her hands. Her voice cracked but carried weight. My son was not a threat. He was a dreamer. They took him from us, but they will not silence him. The crowd roared. Over the next week, protests spread across the country. From New York to Los Angeles, Marcus's face appeared on posters. His music was blasted from speakers at rallies. Vigils turned into marches. Marches turned into movements. Kane under fire. For the first time in his career, Richard Kane wasn't protected by the system. The video was too clear, the outrage too widespread. Internal Affairs opened an investigation within hours. The mayor, under immense pressure, announced Kane had been suspended without pay. But suspension wasn't enough. The people demanded charges. Every day, crowds surrounded the Stonebridge courthouse, chanting for justice. Reporters camped outside Kane's house, where his windows stayed shuttered. For the first time, Kane felt the walls closing in. He had built a life on fear, but now he was the one being hunted. The community transforms Marcus's death galvanized East Stonebridge like nothing before. Kids who once avoided protests now marched at the front. Local artists painted murals overnight. Marcus's face with angel wings, his lyrics in bold colors across crumbling walls. Even those who had given up on justice began to believe change was possible. Because Marcus wasn't just another victim. He was a voice. His music gave his story weight. His words gave the movement a soundtrack. And the more the system tried to delay, the louder his supporters grew. The indictment. 2 weeks after the shooting, prosecutors announced what many thought they'd never hear. Officer Richard Kane was being charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse. Tears streamed down faces that had waited too long for accountability. Denise Bell clutched Maya, whispering, "We're one step closer, baby." One step closer, but everyone knew the battle wasn't over. A trial awaited. A jury would decide Kane's fate. And history had shown that justice, especially against police officers, was rarely served. Still, this time felt different. This time they had the video. They had Marcus's voice echoing in every speaker across America. They had a movement that refused to back down, and Kane, once the untouchable shadow of Stonebridge, was about to face the light. This is the explosive centerpiece, the shooting, the viral video, and the birth of the movement. Part 4. The Trial of Richard Kane. The courthouse in downtown Stonebridge had never seen so much attention. Reporters lined the sidewalks, their cameras pointed toward the stone steps like vultures waiting for a carcass. Protesters filled the streets, chanting, holding signs with Marcus Bell's face, his lyrics, his name. It wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a national reckoning. Richard Kane, the man once feared in silence, was now the defendant, walking through the courthouse doors in a gray suit, his jaw clenched, eyes avoiding the cameras. His lawyers flanked him, but the jeers from the crowd cut through the morning air. Murderer. Justice for Marcus. Kane didn't flinch, but deep down he knew this wasn't just another day. This time he couldn't control the narrative. The prosecution versus the defense. The prosecution opened with power. District Attorney Carla Jennings stood tall before the jury, her voice firm, her words sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not complicated. On December 14th, Richard Kane shot and killed an unarmed teenager, Marcus Bell. He was not a threat. He was not committing a crime. He was walking home. And because of one man's abuse of power, Marcus Bell is dead. Jennings paused, holding up a still frame from the viral video. Marcus's hands raised, Kane's gun drawn. This image will stay with you. It should stay with you, because it tells the truth. Kane's defense attorney, Gregory Malone, countered with a familiar tactic. He painted Kane as a dedicated officer in a dangerous neighborhood, forced to make split-second decisions. This was a tragedy, Malone said, but not a crime. Officer Kane believed his life was in danger. He had reason to believe Marcus Bell was reaching for a weapon. You will see that his actions, while tragic, were justified under the law. The jury listened, stone-faced. The battle lines were drawn. Denise Bell takes the stand. When Marcus's mother, Denise, was called, the courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness stand slowly, clutching Marcus's headphones in her hands like a relic. Her testimony wasn't about facts. It was about humanity. My son was 17 years old, she began, her voice breaking but steady. He loved music. He wanted to make people listen. He carried notebooks, not weapons. He dreamed of a future this city never gave him the chance to see. Jennings asked gently, "Did Marcus ever carry a gun?" Denise shook her head, tears sliding down her face. Never. The only thing he carried was his words. Malone tried to challenge her, asking whether Marcus ever got into trouble. Denise looked at him sharply. He was a kid in Stonebridge. Trouble found everyone here. But he wasn't a criminal. He was a dreamer. And Kane stole him from us. Her words rippled through the room. Some jurors blinked back tears. The viral video in court. The prosecution played the viral video in full, projected on a large screen. The shaky footage filled the courtroom with the sounds of sirens, Kane's shouting, and the fatal gunshot. The jury watched as Marcus raised his hands, as papers fluttered down, as his body collapsed to the ground. The silence afterward was heavy, broken only by muffled sobs in the gallery. Jennings spoke over the frozen final frame. This is not policing. This is not protection. This is murder. The defense tried to undermine the video. They brought in experts who slowed the footage frame by frame, suggesting Marcus's movement could have looked like he was reaching. They argued that Kane had less than 2 seconds to decide, but Jennings struck back. 2 seconds was all Marcus had to live, and Kane chose to end it. Kane's testimony, when Kane himself took the stand, the atmosphere grew electric. He straightened his tie, trying to project confidence. But his eyes darted, his voice betrayed tension. "I was doing my job," Kane insisted. "That night I saw a suspect who refused to comply. I thought he was going for a weapon." "I had to act," Jennings pressed him. "Did you find a weapon?" "No." "Did Marcus Bell make any verbal threats?" "No." "Then tell this jury, Mr. Kane, what exactly justified pulling the trigger?" Kane hesitated. It looked like he was reaching." Jennings leaned closer. "Or maybe it just looked like a young black man you had already decided was guilty." The courtroom gasped. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Kane's mask cracked in front of the jury. The community's voice outside the courthouse. The protests grew larger by the day. Civil rights leaders, celebrities, and even senators came to Stonebridge to march. Marcus's music blasted from loudspeakers, his lyrics carried like gospel. Maya Bell, his little sister, addressed a rally one night. Standing on the steps with a megaphone, she shouted, "They thought they killed my brother's voice." "But can you hear him now?" The crowd roared, chanting Marcus's lyrics. Even shadows fade when the truth gets told. Inside the courthouse, jurors couldn't escape the reality outside. They walked past murals, vigils, and chants every day. They knew this case wasn't just about Kane. It was about history. Closing arguments. Jennings delivered her closing argument with fire. Marcus Bell wasn't a suspect. He wasn't a threat. He was a son, a brother, a voice for his community. And Richard Kane silenced him with a bullet. If we excuse this, if we call this justice, then no young man in this country will ever be safe again. The law must mean something. Accountability must mean something. And it starts here. It starts today, Malone countered with fear. If you convict Officer Kane, you send a message that police officers can no longer protect themselves in dangerous situations. Every cop will hesitate and lives will be lost. This was a tragedy, yes, but not murder. The jury listened, but their faces revealed nothing. The verdict, after 3 tense days of deliberation, the jury filed back into the courtroom. The world held its breath. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Gasps, cries, and shouts erupted. Denise collapsed into Maya's arms, sobbing with relief. Protesters outside exploded into cheers, their chants echoing down the courthouse steps. The judge banged his gavel for order, but the words had already changed history. On the charge of manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. Richard Kane sat frozen, his face pale, his jaw slack. For the first time, the untouchable cop was touched by the law. Aftermath. The sentencing was scheduled for a later date, but the conviction itself was monumental. Across the nation, headlines screamed, "Former officer found guilty in killing of teenager Marcus Bell. Justice in Stonebridge." For many, it was the first time they saw accountability for a police killing. For others, it was just one step in a longer fight. But for Denise and Maya, it was both heartbreak and healing. Marcus was gone, but his voice had forced the system to listen. This part builds the courtroom drama, gives powerful testimony, and ends with Kane finally convicted. Part 5. The fall of Kane and the eternal legacy of Marcus. The world had waited for the verdict, and when it came, guilty on all counts, a collective breath was released. But justice wasn't complete yet. Richard Kane, the man who had terrorized East Stonebridge for years, still had to face sentencing. And the people weren't going to stop until they saw him stripped of everything he once used to control them. The sentencing. The courtroom was even more crowded on sentencing day. Protesters gathered outside again, chanting for the maximum penalty. Inside, reporters filled every bench, their pens scratching, cameras flashing. Kane entered in an orange jumpsuit this time, shackled, his eyes hollow. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. He looked smaller now, diminished, no longer the monster who once made people cross the street in fear. Judge Evelyn Carter addressed the room. Her tone was measured but heavy with finality. Richard Kane abused his badge, betrayed his oath, and took the life of a young man who posed no threat. His actions ignited outrage not only in this city but across the nation. And today, this court delivers its judgment. She paused, looking directly at Kane. On the charge of second-degree murder, I sentence you to 35 years in state prison. On the charge of manslaughter, I sentence you to 10 years, to run consecutively. You will serve a total of 45 years behind bars. Gasps filled the courtroom. Denise Bell clutched Maya's hand, whispering, "We did it, baby." "We did it." Kane slumped in his chair, his face drained of color. The man who once wielded fear like a weapon was now powerless, facing decades in a cell. For the first time in Stonebridge's history, a cop had been held accountable. The community's transformation in. The weeks after the sentencing, East Stonebridge began to change. It wasn't overnight. Poverty and struggle still clung to the streets. But something felt different. The murals of Marcus grew larger, spreading across the city. Local artists painted his face on abandoned buildings, his lyrics in bold letters. Even shadows fade when the truth gets told. His music, once confined to SoundCloud, exploded on streaming platforms. Fans across the country downloaded his tracks, turning his words into anthems of resistance. Within months, his mixtape hit charts he never lived to see. Teachers used his verses in classrooms to talk about justice. Activists quoted his lyrics at rallies. His story was written into history books, not just as another tragedy, but as a spark that forced change. Denise and Maya for Denise, the victory in court didn't erase her pain. She still set a plate for Marcus at the dinner table sometimes. She still cried when she heard his songs on the radio. But she also found strength in her grief. She became an advocate, speaking at events across the country, telling Marcus's story so no other mother would have to suffer as she did. Maya, now carrying her brother's torch, found her own voice. At 15, she began writing poetry, her words echoing Marcus's vision. At rallies, she performed her poems, standing in front of crowds chanting her brother's name. Together, they kept Marcus alive. Kane in prison, meanwhile, Richard Kane's life behind bars was the exact opposite of the power he once held. He was no longer the man with the badge, no longer feared. Other inmates knew his name, his crime, his infamy. He walked prison halls with his head down, learning quickly that the authority he once abused meant nothing here. The system he had once weaponized against others now swallowed him whole. Some journalists later wrote profiles about him, asking whether he felt remorse. Kane never answered directly. He gave vague responses about split-second decisions and the burden of policing. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. The world had moved on without him. Kane became a symbol, not of strength, but of downfall. A warning of what happens when unchecked power finally meets accountability. The movement grows Marcus Bell's story ignited something bigger than Stonebridge. Across the nation, his name was shouted alongside others, victims of police brutality whose families still waited for justice. His case set precedent, proving convictions were possible, that the system could bend under enough pressure. Laws began to change. State legislatures debated police accountability measures with Marcus's face on posters outside their chambers. Departments were forced to reconsider use of force policies. Body cameras, once optional, became mandatory in several states. It wasn't perfect. The fight wasn't over. But Marcus's death had carved a path for progress. Marcus's legacy, a year after his death. The city of Stonebridge, renamed Jefferson Street, the site of the shooting, Marcus Bell Way. At the unveiling ceremony, crowds filled the block. Denise and Maya stood beneath the new street sign, tears in their eyes. Mayor Torres spoke. Marcus Bell was more than a victim. He was a voice, a son, a dreamer who deserved better. Today we honor him not just with a name on a street, but with a commitment to justice. Then the speakers blasted Marcus's track, Crooked Streets. Thousands sang along, their voices echoing through the same streets where Marcus once walked. For a moment, it felt like he was still there, his words alive, his spirit unbroken. The final verse Maya often revisited her brother's notebooks, the ones Kane scattered across the hood of his cruiser the night of the shooting. In one of the final pages, Marcus had written, "If I don't make it, let the music speak. If they take me down, let my people rise. I may be one, but together we're strong. Don't let my story die." Those words became the foundation of the Marcus Bell Foundation, a non-profit Denise and Maya launched to support young artists in underserved communities. They funded studios, mentorships, and scholarships, giving other kids the chance Marcus never had. And every time a teenager recorded their first track, every time a lyric turned into hope, Marcus lived again. Epilogue. The Eternal Shadow. Richard Kane will spend decades behind bars. His name forever cursed, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. But Marcus Bell? His shadow grew into something eternal. His voice carried beyond Stonebridge, beyond the courtroom, beyond the grave. His music still plays in headphones, cars, rallies, and classrooms. His lyrics still sting like truth in a world that tries to silence it. Because Marcus wasn't just a victim. He was a spark. And sparks don't die. They ignite flames. And in America, where justice has too often been denied, Marcus Bell's flame still burns. This conclusion closes the Kane arc, immortalizes Marcus, and leaves the audience with hope, reflection, and fire for justice. If this story moved you, smash the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Ed Nike Shadow Stories for more powerful storytelling about justice, true crime, and the untold stories America can't ignore. Comment below. Do you think Kane's conviction was true justice, or just one rare exception?